Welcome to the Ascent Podcast, a show about inspiring people who explain their path to achievement. I'm your host, Joe Burgess, Wealth Advisor at Moxie Wealth Management. This is part 2 of our 2-part episode with Joe Cavanaugh, founder and CEO of Youth Frontiers. Today, Joe explains some deliberate parenting techniques he teaches in his Parent Academy, the result of which teaches kids values such as humility, courage, and respect, while at the same time improves their overall mental health and stability. As well-intentioned parents, his insight can help us to provide a high-level playbook for guiding our children. Joe, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Joe.
So, now that we've highlighted some of the negative consequences of certain parenting styles, how do you go about giving parents the tools to develop stronger character with their children?
Well, I try to simplify things in 3s. In our Geometry of a Leader series with adults, it's presence, humility, courage. With comedy, it's always comedies in 3s. And it also is easy for me to remember. Once you get to 4, 5, 6, or 7, I've forgotten it.
Right.
So I never will give the 10 strategies for being a parent, because by number 4, you've forgotten
Right.
So 3, we can remember things in 3. What are the 3 that we focus on with our Parent Academy? The first is this. Our role as parents is to raise strong, not fragile kids. The second is our role as parents is to raise responsible, not self-absorbed kids. And the third is our job as parents is to raise kids that know they're precious, not perfect. So how do we raise strong, responsible kids that know they're precious? And when I share that with people, they go, oh yeah, the third one's the most important. I'm like, no, it's a 3-legged stool.
Yeah.
You want to have kids that know they're precious but be fragile? That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or you want narcissistic, self-absorbed kids that are strong and precious? God help us.
Right.
Because you don't want, we have enough examples of strong people that think they're perfect.
Yeah.
That are narcissists. That's not a good thing.
So let's unpack that a little bit. So strong, what's the first part? How do we help our kids become strong?
My daughter, Tess, when she was 5, we moved to our neighborhood, and there were a couple kids in the neighborhood that were, the first week were being kind of not very nice to her. They were older and they were kind of teasing her a little bit. It wasn't, but I could tell it hurt Tess, and she came in the house and she was kind of sad. And I looked at her and I said, I saw what happened out in the, outside. And she kind of nodded, and I gave her a little hug, and she said, so I said, take 3 deep breaths. And there's research on 3 deep breaths will calm your, however, what you're feeling. So parents always have your kids before, if they're upset or anxious or losing it, 3 deep breaths before you say anything or do anything. But then I looked at her and I said, I saw what happened out there on the sidewalk, Tess. I'm glad that happened to you. And she looked at me with her eyes opened wide. And I said, I'm glad that happened to you, because now you know what never to do to someone else. And she has taken that. And you ask her teachers or her friends or people in her school that Tess is the kid that will reach out to the loner, to the kid that is maybe not welcomed or being made fun of. She'll stand up for them. She learned from her pain, and that's what pain is about. It's pain and suffering is the great teacher. And so when we strip that from our kids, we strip them of one of the greatest teachers in life. So what I say to parents is, let your kids experience some amount of emotional pain, let them fall, and then be there to cheer them on so they get up and they keep walking the difficult road of life. We as parents, I think we underestimate our children's ability to overcome difficulties. And we have somewhat, and I say this in quotation marks, we have somewhat evolved, quotation marks, to think life can be or should be without difficulties and without pain. And that is not a good thing. So deliberate parenting, do not protect your child from hurts and skinned knees and broken hearts. But instead, way more important, help them understand the psychological truth that at times difficulty and pain are part of life. Maybe undeserved, maybe deeply unfair, but a part of life. So another thing that we'll say with this about making strong kids, don't take away their fear. Instead, teach them to be brave and strong so they can walk sometimes the scary road of life. And with our daughter Tess, I keep going back to it because that's my experience in parenting.
Right, for sure.
When she walks out the door, and we've said this since she was in kindergarten, you're strong, Tess. We're here to support you. But we believe you can handle just about anything. And she, her head and her shoulders go back a little bit, and she faces the difficulties because she's been told by us that that's part of life.
Yeah.
You know, her line is, Dad, life is tough. We're tougher. And what a great lesson for kids to know.
Yeah.
So that's the first one, is to be strong, not fragile. The second,
responsible,
not self-absorbed.
Yeah.
I always use the story of Tess Cavanaugh, and she has two names. She has Tess, first name, Cavanaugh, last name. Now, I also know I want to acknowledge that there's family systems where that creates some challenges. But go with the idea of it. Don't get rattled with the analogy. Tess, you have a first name. You're beautiful. You're unique. There's no one like you. There never will be anyone like you. But you're also Cavanaugh. And it's not just about you. Your behavior, the way your actions, your life impacts your mom and dad, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your neighbors, your friends, your teachers, your community, your school. It's not all about you. It's way more than just you. And that gives purpose. That gives a young person a sense of seeing the other. And one of the... So Eugene Peterson, a theologian, talks about the danger of us focusing, and maybe he doesn't say the danger, I'll say the danger of focusing on three things. Again, the Trinity. Your holy wants, your holy needs, and your holy feelings. And what does that do when we start thinking that way? Well, we become the selfie generation with our phones. And you keep going that self-centered, self-absorbed, selfish. And if it's all about you, there's a danger in not seeing the other. And so when we do our respect retreats with schools, so we're in front of 200 kids and ninth graders, respect means re-see, re-spectator, re-see things. So how do you re-see not just yourself, that it's not just about you, but how do you see others around you? And what's happened in the last, well, first of all, with the advent of social media and the iPhone and great things. I'm not a troglodyte around technology by any means. But the impact on kids who are not grounded yet in life is really damaging. And we intuitively know that as adults, but we as parents have abdicated and become bystanders and let our kids go down a dangerous path with a dangerous tool, letting our kids have their social media, iPhones in their bedroom. Oh my goodness, really?
Right.
And the damage done with that, I see it I can tell the horror stories of that.
Hold that thought for a second. We're going to take a break here. But when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about my own experience with my kids and their phones. Hey there, this is Joe. You know me as the host of this podcast, but did you know that I'm also the co-founder and president of Moxie Wealth Management, a boutique wealth management firm in Minneapolis, Minnesota? My team and I excel at taking complex family and business planning concepts and making our financial advice easy to understand. We recognize the trust that executives and families place in our team and value our role in helping our clients be intentional with their assets. When you partner with Moxie, my team and I focus on creating a plan that encompasses your financial goals and philanthropy, while also understanding how you want your wealth to impact your family and future generations. You can trust our unique expertise to build a thoughtful yet strategic wealth and legacy plan for your future. To learn more about me and my firm, send me an email at joe@moxiewealth.com. That's joe@moxiewealth.com. I'm a registered representative and investment advisor representative of Securian Financial Services, Inc. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Securian Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. North Star Resource Group is independently owned and operated. Moxie Wealth Management is affiliated with North Star Resource Group. So, picking up on this concept with kids and their phones, when I think of my kids and their smartphones, we try to monitor that, but, inevitably, they end up breaking their phones.
Sure.
Right. They
That's part of life.
Throw it on the ground and shatter it, That's every kid. And I harken back to when I was a kid, we didn't have a ton of money. Number one, I wouldn't have had a $600 to $1,000 toy. Number two, if I broke it, there was no chance I was getting another one. Right. But the week or so that it takes to get a new phone, I see an entirely different kid than I see otherwise. Mm-hmm. Very relaxed, very happy, very social with the family. It's, I guess, sad because the other issue I think that parents have or that we feel is it seems to be how they're connecting, whether or not that's a fair statement.
Mm-hmm.
But
it is how they're connecting.
But if I took the phone away, are they not going to be able to meet up with their buddies at the next place? Because they have a chat room together, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But there is this, it's very keenly aware that when it's not there, there's a different persona there. So
summer camps were one of my great experiences growing up, and you were disconnected with everything outside of camp. I mean, you might get one letter in the couple weeks you're at camp.
Right.
I wish I knew I could cite this
Trout
study.
Lake.
Okay, mine was Camp Warren. But now, I wish I could cite the study, but this is the analogy of it. And I think people intuitively will go, that makes sense. So kids that go to camp and are allowed to use social media and cell phones, they actually become more unhappy from the beginning to the end of camp because they're seeing what they're missing. And that whole idea of FOMO, fear of missing out. Kids that are not allowed to have any social media, where there's no phones and they actually become healthier in the mental health concept because they're forced to have actual, real communication relationships. They don't know what they're missing out on, which we never knew what we were missing out on. If you didn't have growing up, there was a party going on, you didn't even know you were missing it. Now you're sitting in your home, in your bedroom, alone, sad, and you're seeing the posts of all the fun that you're missing in life. Yeah. And it does a whammy on your mental health.
Right.
Duh. The damage of that is pretty significant. Some of the data around that, the impact on social media, especially on girls, it's very different. Social media affects girls. Video games, online pornography affects boys more. Now it's becoming a little more blended with that, but let's just take that as a loose framework, yeah. Gene Twangy's work, one stat, 56%, over half of 8th grade girls who use social media over 1.4 hours per day. And some parents are like, that's not, I think the average is significantly more than that.
Yeah.
Experience greater incidences of depression. Now you think, well, wait a minute, they're connecting with people. No, actually the stuff that goes on with social media is undercutting their sense of mental health. Loneliness factor. Today, 61% of young adults now feel, quote, unquote, serious loneliness. And Richard Leiter speaks of this as this: isolation is fatal. And as in the pandemic, we have become even more set in our silos at home. You're not even rubbing elbows with kids in schools, or you weren't in the pandemic.
Right.
And the impact, McKinsey just did this report about 6 months ago, on the long-term impact of this group of kids that were isolated during the pandemic. And life expectancy, lifelong compensation, obesity rates, depression rates. It's going to follow this group, this cohort, throughout their lives. And the way to counter that, so this is responsible, not self-absorbed.
Right.
The way to counter that on a mental health piece is, and there's studies that show this, one way to reduce depression is to increase one's service to others. So when I was a camp counselor, when a kid was lonely in my cabin, I wouldn't say, "Oh, we're gonna have a phone call with your mom and dad," or "You can leave camp," or no. What I would do is challenge these kids. I wouldn't try to make them better.
Yeah.
I would say, "You're lonely. I'm sorry to hear that. I want you for the next 3 days to look out for the other lonely kids in this cabin and in camp, and I want you to reach out to them, give purpose." It's that Jewish concept, tikkun olam, to heal the world. And the word responsibility, I break that in two. Respond with your ability to the needs of others. So the life message here is use your gifts, use who you are to make the world better, because it's not all about you. So that's the second one, is responsible, not self-absorbed.
And the thing I was thinking about as you were talking is, that is actually so much more of a dynamic thought than I thought it otherwise. I mean, just the concept of thinking of others. I think we've just veered on a path where that is something that has to be reminded, because without being reminded, they're not thinking. I remember, and now, of course, I sound really old when I say this, but I remember in 2008 when Facebook first came out. I think that's the first time I signed up anyways. And I remember the line that said, "What are you thinking about?" And, of course, I was a journalism major in college, right? I didn't end up in journalism or marketing, but newsworthy was timely, relevant, important, all that kind of, everything you had to put in your lead line in journalism school, right? And I remember when Facebook came out, and I thought, what am I thinking? Oh, how is that newsworthy? And why would anyone else want to know what I'm thinking?
Well, today it's all about your holy needs, your holy wants, your holy feelings. That is what's preeminent.
Right.
In other words, it is all about you, and that's all people care about. And and what I think I'm hoping this is my St. John's philosophy education. I hope it's accurate. I'm quoting Aristotle says, it's not the extremes, it's the middle. So I'm not saying you go away from the self to the other, and I'm not saying go to the other to the self. It's like, it's that balance. It's the yin and yang. It's how do you find that ability to, find the balance between the two. So the third
precious. Let's talk about precious. Yeah.
Precious, not perfect. The word precious sometimes brings the Lord of the Rings Gollum, my precious. But I'm not trying. It doesn't. That's not what I'm talking about. Precious. Other words that would align with that are that they know they're loved. They know they're loved, that they're not worshipped. That's important. From my faith, which is a very important part of my life, you worship God, you love people. And so with parenting, you love your kids. Don't ever worship them. Love your kids. There's a big difference.
How are parents worshiping their kids right now?
Well, my kid needs to get the medal. My kid, I hear how many parents, my kid is perfect, or the messages that we say to our kids, you're perfect just the way you are. Really? Oh. You want your kid just to stick the way they are for the rest of really? You don't want that, really?
Yeah.
Who thinks they're perfect? Well, pathological people think they're perfect.
Right.
Narcissists think they're perfect. We've had multiple examples. You just open up the newspaper, you see examples of people that think they're perfect. Don't be careful. I tell people, you don't want to be in a relationship with someone that thinks they're perfect. Any of us who are married,
Right.
Yeah, right. And fortunately, I have a wife that we communicate. We know we're neither of us are perfect, and if either of us sometimes think we're perfect, it's usually me. She'll gently, lovingly remind me that I'm not perfect, and I have some lifelong friends from nursery school. Some of them are from nursery school, 5 of them in particular, and we remind each other, you're not perfect, and what a great gift to have. So. Precious, not perfect. It's about showing our children that they are loved with no strings attached. I was doing a retreat last spring. I still sometimes get my jeans on and get in front of 200-300 ninth graders. I make sure I bring younger, cooler people than just me to be my teammates so I don't look like this grandpa up there. I think it was during the lunch break, I had 3 ninth graders, girls, come up to me and said, I'm feeling so much pressure to get the best grades, and they were saying this from their parents, the best grades, winning at this, and getting in the best college. It's just really hard. And I'm like, you're in 9th grade and you're getting pressure already to get in the best college. It's like, again, meaning well, and I'm sure the parents mean well because they want their kids to be successful. But if you are putting that type of message on them, they can start to interpret it that they will not be loved because if they're not the best, or they're not perfect, or they will not be successful in life if they're not perfect. And
so from a parent standpoint, being less focused on outcomes.
Take perfect out of your vocabulary. Stop focusing on the outcomes, focus on the effort, because that is what is going to make your kids successful. So if I want, maybe one of my core goals in life and core hopes in life is that my daughter will be successful in relationships, in her vocation, in her membership in the community. So the question is, how do you get her that way? How do you get her on that path? It ain't by focusing on outcomes at her age. It's focusing on her effort. Mm-hmm. And so it trains her. It's basically training her like an athlete. It's not just giving the kid that sits on the couch the medal. You won the triathlon. Mm-hmm. No, getting them up in the practice of it. And part of that is about helping our young people be humble, not arrogant. And when you focus on the idea of perfectionism, that breeds arrogance. And I talked about worship versus love. Mm-hmm. Our kids are not mini gods, demigods. And God help us for those of us that know that our kid thinks they're their own God. It's like, Carl Jung, the 20th century Swiss psychologist, talked about, focused the work on the human shadow. And it kind of aligns even with, the Star Warian dark side.
Yeah.
Our kids have got to know that they have a shadow, and that's okay. We all do. It's the human condition. We need to raise healthy human beings. There's good and bad in us. We're sinner and saint. And if someone is not able to integrate in life their shadow and see themselves as both good and bad, sometimes right, sometimes wrong, what Jung would say, they project their shadow then on others. Mm. And so that's very dangerous behavior because it breeds arrogance, it breeds a sense of certainty, fundamentalism. Fundamentalists project everything, and they have nothing that they need to see differently because they have the monopoly on the truth, and they know everything. They know it all. They are God, if you think of it that way. And I think that's the phenomenon with college students. This talks about what's happening on colleges. The whole idea of a cancel culture with Generation Z or the shout down culture. We can shout down anyone who disagrees with us or thinks differently than us because I am all good, always right, the holder of the truth. You are evil, always wrong, the people of the lie. The Pew Research study came out now says, and this is our society, 42% now of people in both political parties, 42% now believe the other side is downright evil. Really? You think that, and then you think you are the arbitrator of good and evil. If you actually think that, and just look at the last 100 years. There's so many warning signs of what happens when we start to demonize the other, whether it's the Jews or the gays or the Japanese during World War II, or these days, the evangelicals, the Muslims, the blacks, the whites. When we stop seeing the dignity and the humanity in each individual, and we focus on groups becoming guilty, bad things happen. really bad things happen. And bad things are happening today in our society. And we as parents have to hold a big chunk of the responsibility of that when we snowplow them and get our kids to think they're perfect. And their house then becomes built on sand and versus the timeless character traits and truths and ageless wisdom from the Stoics to the Buddhists to the, and then we wonder why anxiety is skyrocketing and depression and social media. We're setting up a generation for failing. And this gets back to our whole driver. Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, says, character is destiny. And when we overpraise, borderline worship our kids, and they start to believe, whether it's on the hockey rink or in a academic paper that they don't get an A on, that they can do no wrong, we unintentionally teach them they don't have a shadow. Rule number 4 in my rules for parenting, I'm going beyond. I have 21
Bonus
rules.
rule?
No, this isn't one of my 10. But sometimes it is your kid's fault. And a healthy child, a healthy human being, understands that. Yep, I might be wrong in this. Another thing in my methodology of 3s, some of the ways that we can raise children and we can raise the next generation, and we can also think differently ourselves, and also ways in which we can think differently ourselves to healing our community and our society. And I don't think I have a conversation with someone when it gets into this, people who are not worried about what is happening to the fabric of our society. And I look at it as, oh my gosh, it's not going to hurt me. I'm in my 60s, and it's like, okay, yeah, I can endure until I'm in the grave. But you know what? My kids or my grandkids, that's who we need to worry about. What's going to happen? What are they going to be living with? So how do we heal this broken relationship? I have 3 things. 1, stop calling either silently or loudly people names. Stop calling people names. We said that in in elementary school or in our student retreats. Don't call people names. Don't put people into groups and label them. So one thing. Second, we say this to our daughter all the time about being strong. Tess, this is the second thing. If you have something to apologize for, do it, and quickly. But if you haven't done anything wrong, do not apologize, because you degrade one of the most sacred human interactions, which is an apology and forgiveness. And we're kind of living in this. People are tripping over each other to apologize for things that, what do you apologize for? I don't know, I just needed to. They told me I had to. Okay, great.
Yeah, if you say anything in the world that isn't with the mainstream, you immediately have to apologize if it's public, right?
And what that does is it makes you fragile, it makes you weak. But more importantly, in relationship, one of the most important things in my marriage is when I have done wrong, I need to apologize. And the longer it takes me to apologize, the more unhappy my evenings are, you know? Right. But take that on an internal thing. So if you have to apologize, do it quickly. But if you don't dilute the sacredness of what an apology is about. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, and this might be, well, they're all important, I think. Always, always, always assume that what you are saying might just be wrong, because some of it is. Because some of it is wrong. And, I just look at, in my 20s, everything I knew that was true. Everything I said was true. I never said stuff that was. Then I became 30. I look back. Oops, some of that stuff wasn't really wrong. Right. So then, but now that I was 30, everything now is true. And you hit 40, you look back. Now that I'm 63, everything that I think is true. That I think. Well, if I look back, nope. So a healthy life is doubt your certainty.
Interesting. Well, I think we'll have to leave that there. But I appreciate all your wisdom. I think this is just an important time, particularly with the pandemic and mental health. And, I guess when you're talking parenting, it's a generational thing that does have to do with social media and everything else that we're going through. But some of your thoughts and wisdom there, I think, are just super helpful for people. So
I'll take, I have many, I wear long sleeve shirts because I have a lot of battle scars in life.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about reading. So a lot of the things that I say are just things that I've read from others, and I'm a great curator. It's not innate wisdom. Mm-hmm. It's not innate wisdom that I have. It's like, I guess wisdom is curating things that are around you. And I have some amazing mentors in life, and I have amazing younger people that actually teach me to see things differently. And so it's surrounding myself with people that keep me humble. Of the earth, humus is of the earth, not of the heavens. And that's what humility is based on, being human. This parenting thing, Joe, it's hard. It's not easy. And I'm not the perfect parent. No one is. And I guess it's breaking away from trying to be a great parent to just be a good parent.
Yeah.
Because parenting asks a lot of us. And it can bring out the best and the worst in us, and sometimes within minutes of each other. So what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to tell other parents to do, is aim for the good, not the great. And if you can be good, that's great.
That's great. Perfect. Well, Joe, I appreciate you coming in. It's been great.
Well, I'm grateful to be here again. It's good to see you, and thanks for the good work that you do.
Thanks for downloading part 2 of this episode with Joe Cavanaugh, founder and CEO of Youth Frontiers. To learn more about the work they're doing with parents, high schoolers, teachers, and business leaders, you can find information about them at youthfrontiers.org. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ascent Podcast, a show about inspiring people who explain their path to achievement. I'm your host, Joe Burgess, wealth advisor and founding partner of Moxie Wealth Management. You can learn more about me and my firm at moxiewealthmanagement.com. That's MOXIE wealthmanagement.com. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.